Oh, I'm so happy to be back with Peter Montgomery from the Right Wing Watch. Thanks, Peter, for dropping in. Now it's just been about a month since we talked last time, hasn't it?
Big month.
Big month. Lots of things change. I mean, all over the news, isn't it? All anyone can talk about is the Capitol riots
Yeah,
and the fallout from that. I know now you live near DC, or you live in DC?
I do live in DC. I'm a few miles north of the Capitol, so
Right.
safely away from it.
I
Thanks.
was gonna say, yeah, so you didn't go down to the rallies or any of that?
I stayed away this time. Normally, I like to go to these things and cover them, but because of COVID, a few thousand people not wearing masks,
Hmm,
I stay away. And
not a smart idea.
I might have been a little worried about the violence in this one. So
I think so. And this, I mean, I know we're not talking about this, but obviously, this is a related subject, isn't it? These people, most of them, if they're Trumpists, they're anti-maskers, anti-vaxxers, they're not wearing masks. It's too soon to tell, but this could end up being a super spreader event on top of all the other stuff. We don't know yet, do we?
it could be. And it is amazing how all these things have gotten intermingled. There's uh, a rally the day before the riot where it was like 7.5 hours of right-wing speakers. Anti-mask stuff was all tangled up in the defending Trump and
Hmm.
having faith in Jesus. And one of the speakers actually was encouraging people to hug the strangers around them and mocking the idea of having a super spreader event. So yeah,
It's
that's
all there.
it's all there.
And the thing is, okay, so I've been covering this from the point of view of it's all this amalgamation of conspiracy theories, Christian nationalism, white supremacist, far right militia groups, QAnon. It's all there, isn't it? What else could you add to the mix? I mean, and Trumpism, I guess you could say, which is all
I would
part and
say
parcel of it.
Trumpism and COVID denialism.
Hmm.
It's all wrapped up together. And in fact, I think some of the real anger and energy that is coming out of the religious right is backlash against pandemic restrictions on churches gathering. So they
Hmm.
have really turned that into part of their evidence that the church is being targeted for persecution by the left, and Trump is been sent by God to protect the church, and so he
Hmm.
has our back, and we need to have his. It's all tied up.
It's all there. And we're going to get into it. I've got a couple of clips to talk about from Pastor Greg Locke. I know you've been following him as well. There's some stuff on the Right Wing Watch's website, isn't there? About he's I guess he came to prominence because he's the anti-mask pastor. He's been railing probably since the lockdown that churches shouldn't be closed. His church in Mount Juliet, Tennessee, I think it is, has stayed open as far as I can tell the whole time, hasn't it?
Yeah, he's very intensely anti-mask. I mean, I call him sort of a professional online angry man because you can find
Hmm.
lots of videos of him online just
Yeah,
looking
sitting in his
pissed off and
car.
screaming. And he was invited to the White House to be there when Trump gave his acceptance speech at the RNC. So he's not.
Right.
You can't dismiss him as a fringe character because he's plugged in. And he was a speaker at the rally the day before that I was talking about. I've just been
Hmm.
spending a ridiculous amount of time going through like 7.5 hours of footage
So
from
much
that rally
content.
and from another rally in December. And he's very much, making those connections that
Hmm.
this is a Christian nation and
Yeah.
it's our duty to protect Trump.
So you've got the Christian nationalist piece in there, the conspiracy theory. I've seen a lot of his videos. I was just watching earlier today a clip. Well, it was a live stream of the. I've got a clip from this in a minute that we'll look at where it's from this last Sunday's service at his church. I guess he goes back to Tennessee and he talks about the fact that he was at the rally or the protest or the riot or whatever, which is quite interesting. So yeah, he's all over the place and he's gaining in prominence, isn't he? Even though he's been shut out because they've shut Parler down, haven't they? From what I heard, Amazon pulled the plug on him, which was their web hosting service, and Google pulled the plug on them as well. So now they're scrambling for a platform.
Yeah, I think that kind of that shutdown of Parler has caught a lot of people by surprise because everybody was
Hmm.
counting on that as their backup to Twitter and Facebook. So I've seen some people going to Gab. I saw somebody this morning talking about moving their site to Jump, which is actually a service I'm not familiar with.
Right.
So I think they're trying to set up, they're trying to
Alternatives.
scramble and set up their alternatives. And I think, one of the things that some people hope Trump is going to do with all the money he raised after the election is try to set up, his own kind of media platform for the right as a way of keeping his hands in things.
Trump News Network. I know Michael Cohen. I listen to his Mea Culpa podcast a lot, and he says Trump. His prediction is Trump is going to retire to Magistan, which is what he's renamed Mar-a-Lago to Magistan, and he's going to be the king of Magistan, and he's going to build next door. He's going to build a media empire. The TNN, the Trump News Network.
Yeah.
It's going to be 24/7 conspiracy theories, QAnon. Christian nationalism, everything.
That's very possible.
It could happen.
Very possible.
Anything can happen. So now let me get the timeline straight. I know you've been following this quite closely. There was another Jericho march, because I know last month when we talked, there was a Jericho march on the 12th of December. But wasn't there another one the day before the riots?
Yes,
the 5th of January?
Right. So that's the one that I've really been pouring through the last couple of days. So yeah, there was the one on December, which was the one in December was very much, they billed it as a prayer rally, and they went, were very careful to try to get people from all different strains of Christianity there. The one on Freedom Plaza the day before the assault on the Capitol, was much more just about stopping the steal, fighting the evil people who were trying to push Trump out of office, pressuring Congress to stand with Trump and to turn the election over to him. Courts and voters be damned. So that was very much the focus, but it was very heavy on Christian nationalist themes and the same intermingling of conservative Christianity and Trump, and characterizing the 2020 election as a spiritual war, and this is a spiritual battleground, and it's just, it's between good and evil, and Trump is the leader of the forces of light, and so yeah, and that went on for 7 hours.
7 hours. So who were some of the key speakers that people might recognize? I think Greg Locke was there. Wasn't he one of the speakers?
Greg Locke, actually, it's interesting. It seemed like they had, among the sponsors, it seemed like they had sort of broken the day into morning and into two parts, sort of an earlier part and after part, but it all just ran together. And so some of the speakers spoke twice. So Greg Locke spoke. So people who were there all day got to hear him do his shtick twice. And Mark Burns is another pastor people might have heard of. He's a conservative black pastor out of South Carolina, and actually not conservative, right wing, screaming about
rabid Trumpist,
the war between good and evil. There were also some big name political figures at the rally, like Roger Stone and Michael Flynn, Ali Alexander, who's really kind of one of the lead organizers of Stop the Steal. Alex Jones was there. Again, I think most people, if they hear Alex Jones, they just think of wild conspiracy theories and lizard people and things like that. But his speech was very much wrapped up in Christian nationalism and how this was a spiritual, a battle of good versus evil. So he's really adopted that as part of who he is and how he positions himself now.
So strange, isn't it? Because we looked at that clip and when we talked last month, didn't we, where Alex Jones spoke at the first Jericho march, and it was quite a shocking thing where he was talking about, all this Christian nationalism, it's all in the Bible, it's end times, book of Revelation, and I had never heard Alex Jones take that line. So you're saying he's doubling down even further now, going down that line.
Very much a repeat of that with his appearance at January 5th. And, his sidekick, Owen Schroyer, was one of the people who also directed really harsh language toward the Congress. I mean, one of the other things that happened at this rally was there were some pretty explicit threats against Congress if they didn't do the right thing, threats of violence. And Schroer was someone who said, up there on Congress, they know they're doing the wrong thing, so they're hiding in the tunnels. They're, I mean, it was,
Wow.
given what happened the next
Pretty
day, it was
extreme.
pretty remarkable speech. But, Ali Alexander led chants of victory or death at that same Freedom Plaza rally. So there was a lot of that.
So then we, of course, had Trump and his close sycophants speaking the next day, right before the Capitol riots, which has garnered most of the attention, hasn't it? Where you've got Rudy Giuliani and Trump and some other politicians. But it seems like the day before isn't getting as much attention. But yeah, you're saying that was equally, if not more, incendiary than the actual speech by Trump.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, one of the interesting things is that people are looking at, the possibility of actual legal liability for some of these folks, for inciting a riot. And so the comments that Trump and Giuliani, Representative Mo Brooks, who is one of the challengers, was also spoke at that rally. He's someone that people are looking at. So, the timeliness, the immediateness is kind of an important thing when you're looking at incitement. So that isn't so much of an issue of the day before in terms of legal liability, but in terms of firing up the crowd and continuing this narrative that the right has been building for weeks, that that this is a righteous battle, that Trump won, that Trump had God's blessing, and it was God's will that Trump stay in office. And it is our obligation, both as Americans and as Christians, to make sure that Joe Biden never becomes president. And several speakers at the rally the day before used that language. Joe Biden will never be president. And here's the interesting thing. Now, here we sit, not quite a week later. Well, actually, a week after that rally. Since then, we've had the insurrection at the Capitol. We've had Trump come out and give a very grudging acknowledgement of sorts that there will be a transfer of power.
Sort of concession. As close as he's going to get to a concession speech, I think.
That's as close as it's going to get. And there are still people who are part of Trump's kind of apostles and prophets crowd who are saying God is yet going to work the miracle. I mean, there was Sunday night. Sunday night was there's a group of prophets that have been having prayer calls twice a week since the election. And so Sunday night was their 22nd, I think. And, they're saying that this is the Red Sea moment. The Christians in America are like the Israelites with their backs against the Red Sea. And there's no way on earth now. The Constitution, the legal stuff is done. So we just have to count on God to do something miraculous. And they're still believing for it to happen.
Absolutely.
So that's pretty remarkable.
It's not over yet, Peter. Come on. There's still a few days left. Anything can happen. Well, that's what I was so fascinated by.
When you consider that on one hand, you have that going on, right? You have people who are prayer warriors who believe that God really does want and intend Trump to have a second term. And then on the other hand, you have evidence that the violent right, the Proud Boys and the real far right people are organizing online, threatening these armed gatherings in state capitals, threatening to come back here to Washington this coming weekend before the inaugural. So it's not over in that sense as well. Some of the folks on the far right did not see the insurrection at the Capitol as a fiasco. They saw it as an incredible victory. That, with a relatively small group of people, they came very close to being able to kill and take hostage the highest level officials in the country. So anyway, so those two things are dramatic. If you've got this group of Christian leaders, and I will say it's not all of them. Some of them have kind of grudgingly come to the place where Trump has been, at least publicly, to say that it's over. But it's kind of I think we talked about it the last time. There's so many prophets who got out on front saying that, prophesying that Trump was going to get a second term. It's hard to walk back from that. And so
Exactly.
they're just until Trump is gone out of Washington and until Biden has had his hand on the Bible and has been inaugurated. Some of them think God is gonna pull off some wild Red Sea miracle to keep
Last
Trump
second.
in office.
Yeah,
And,
it's absolutely crazy.
And what I don't know is how much of that Trump himself is hearing. You know, I don't know.
Yeah. Now that he's been banned from Twitter and Facebook and all that, where's his influence is suddenly gone. His bully pulpit has been taken away from him. And of course, people are saying, my God, this is, 4 years too late. Where the hell have they been? He's violated every sort of possible policy, certainly on Twitter, for bullying and racism and all sorts of horrible things. He should have been banned years ago. What a different world it might be today if Trump had been, banned from Twitter.
Right. And
years ago.
And the fact, it's kind of remarkable. So, particularly given that he's lost those outlets, he's still the president of the United States.
Mm-hmm.
Any moment he wanted, he could walk into the briefing room and have a global audience if he wanted to stand up there and say something to us. But he hasn't done that. Instead, he and his family and his folks are fulminating about, censorship. And they're really trying to push the narrative and change the conversation away from the deadly, insurrection at the U.S. Capitol and the people that were killed there. And they want to make this a conversation about the tech companies having too much power over but I think there's certainly a lot of folks worked up about that, but I don't think they're having success at changing the narrative. In the House of Representatives today, they're going to vote on an article of impeachment for the president, and that's going to pass, I expect.
Sure, yeah. But then it goes to the Senate, and will we see a repeat of what happened the last time where, well, technically now they still have a slim majority, and, until the new two people from Georgia get sworn in, what's going to happen? But they need to do it. I think it's if nothing else on principle, just because he did incite an insurrection against the government that he purports to be the leader of. It's crazy. Yeah. So I'm interested. Let's take a look at some of these. If you're interested, let's have a look at some of these crazy clips from good old Greg Locke. Okay. Right. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to share the screen here. And we'll pull up these clips. Okay, share the screen. I have to remember to share the computer sound, otherwise we won't have any sound on this thing. Okay, so can you see me? Can you see the screen now?
I can.
So this is interesting. I'll show this one on the Right Wing Watch in a minute, but this is a clip from Greg Locke's service just the other day. You can see it was streamed live on the 10th of January. So it was after the Capitol riots. And of course he was there. What's interesting too, is if people really want to get crazy, look at the chat on the side. I mean, it's just, everyone's totally pro Greg Locke, pro Trump, pro God, the whole thing. Anyway, I'll play a minute or two of this clip.
I was in Washington, D.C. when this whole thing went down. And you are being lied to. It has made me an extreme large target to say that. That's why they're not live streaming us this morning. Bunch of cowards. I was there. I sat from here to that wall right there, closer than that, to the president. He did not incite violence. This was a setup from the word go, ladies and gentlemen. They knew this would be the biggest attended rally that that man has ever had in the history of his presidency. They knew that we were going to be there willing to fight. They knew that people were going to be there willing to stand. And I was there on the steps in front of 1 million people with a bullhorn on top of a trailer leading a prayer rally. And I'm here to tell you, I watched what happened. It's not just the video footage. That stuff is not fake. It is undeniable and irreconcilable with the nonsense that Fox News and CNN and Twitter and Facebook is purporting right now. They were let in the gate. They were let in the door. And the people that were trying to knock the windows out and tear stuff up were actually pulled down by the Trump supporters and scolded and rebuked and told not to do that. Because I'm going to tell you something. Do you realize how many millions of us have rallied for months and months and months, and we've never even left a banana peel in the road? We've never set anything on fire. We've never killed anybody. We've never burnt stuff, looted stuff, stole stuff. And you expect me to believe when you get all them people together that all of a sudden some insurrection is going to mount and we're going to start killing people and storming the Capitol building and tearing stuff down? It was a provable setup from the word go. And let me tell you something. You know what bothers me about it? It was used by all of these so-called Republicans to then stand up and say, well, we were going to vote against the certification of the election. Marsha Blackburn.
Anyway, that's enough of Greg Locke. But yeah, so that's what Greg Locke's talking about on Sunday, the 10th of January, that it was all a setup, and he goes on to talk about it was Antifa actually who infiltrated the rally, which has become another talking point of these far right and evangelicals as well, isn't it? Have you heard that line too?
Absolutely. I mean, the speed with which they are able to put out, alternative facts, to use a phrase,
you could say that,
is remarkable. And almost immediately, the charges that this was not really that this was Antifa somehow, or anti-fascist activists, or provocateurs that were, had nothing to do with the march. I mean, we heard that immediately from conservative members of Congress and religious right leaders who were just trying to distance themselves and protect Trump and the Stop the Steal movement. But it's not true. When you look at, now that we've actually had, several days of law enforcement investigations and arrests, the people that have been identified and arrested are not Antifa. They're not, these are,
they haven't found any.
They're Trump supporters. They're, and it's interesting because the narrative on one hand has been to disavow this and blame it on the left. On the other hand, that message hasn't gotten through to everybody on the right, because some people on the right are like, hell no, this was us patriots and we should be proud of it and we need to do more of it. So that's out there too.
Well, and it's so ironic that, these people, they knew that they were being live streamed and they were taking selfies in front of the Capitol. And it's now they're getting rounded up, aren't they, by the FBI and other law enforcement agencies, because they're all over social media. They're trying to scrub their social media feeds now, but it's too late. They're out there. They're all over the place. They may not be on their social media feed, but someone else has taken a picture of them.
Yeah, it's a very new take on the phrase "the revolution will not be televised," because this attempted revolution was televised and streamed, and
all over the place.
I think it's a sign of either cluelessness or confidence and arrogance that Trump was going to be their president, and so they were going to be on the winning side, and they had nothing to worry about because they were, they were taking this to Congress, and they were going to help Trump stay in office. So I think the confidence that there was not going to be any accountability for doing what they did was, I don't know any other way you can explain all those folks proudly displaying themselves on social media unless they really did not think there would be any consequences whatsoever for that. Some of that is also, white people expecting to not be held accountable.
Yeah, and of course, it goes without saying that there's been a lot of people pointing out the disparity in the police presence and the police response between that and, say, some of the Black Lives Matters rallies. That's got to be said. This was a white group of people that, I mean, I won't say they walked unopposed into the Capitol, but there was a shocking failure of the police. They took hours to show up with the National Guard. There would have been, people have said if it was Black Lives Matter, they would have been shot to pieces. There would have been hundreds and hundreds of arrests on the day. So yeah, that's another issue. But here's another clip from our good old Greg Locke. This is interesting now. It's a couple minutes long, so you're going to have to bear with this. But what's interesting is that this is on, obviously, your Right Wing Watch YouTube channel. But there's this blend of conspiracy theories. You've got QAnon. You've got all kinds of stuff in what Greg Locke says here. And I think this might have been right before the rally that you were talking about the day before. So let's have a look at Greg Locke.
I'm going to tell you some things you ought to expect this year. Now, I'm putting my neck on the line now. I ain't never done nothing like this. But I'm going to obey. They think they got this whole thing wrapped up. I don't care what happens on the 6th, and I don't care what happens on the 20th. I'm going to tell you something. God Almighty is about to dethrone Nancy Pelosi. It's about to happen. He's about to dethrone that baby butchering mongrel. About to dethrone that woman. I'm telling you right now, if New York doesn't repent, if New York doesn't turn around, if New York doesn't get right with God, if New York don't recall that crazy, wicked, vile mayor and governor they got, you better know something. God's going to reach up. He's going to destroy that place. It's going to be desolate. It's going to be laid waste. And I'm telling you, if we do not get right with God in 2021, we ain't going to get another space of grace. This is it right here. This is it. This is it. God's about to upset the whole apple cart. Y'all can sit down. I'll be here all day. Y'all make me feel like John Hagee when you do that. It's going to happen. People like you smoking a pipe dream. No, I'm telling you it's going to happen. I can see it. Like a chessboard, I can see it. Oh, Nero Newsom out in California? Huh? A Hitler wannabe? Shutting down all them churches? Telling people they got to mask up, can't have family gatherings. That dirty rascal has no mask and goes to his family's place, goes to a restaurant, costs $7,000 for a plate of food. God's about to upset that whole deal. I'm telling you right now, old Nero Newsom ain't staying in power. You hear me? I declare unto you right now, he ain't staying in power. Oh, Cuomo, that joker ain't staying in power. God's going to bring the whole thing down. It's all going to come toppling down. We about to see some exposure of these bunch of pedophile sex trafficking rings been popping up in Hollywood, been popping up in the White House, been popping up overseas. God's about to expose all of it. I'll tell you right now, he's going to expose every bit of that mess. Every bit of it. I don't care what WikiLeaks says. I don't care who they pardon and who they don't. I'm telling you, the Clintons got it coming. God's going to expose all of it.
All right. So that's our Greg Locke. You hear the QAnon stuff in there. You know, the pedophile sex rings in California and Washington, D.C. I thought he was talking about that with Nancy Pelosi, but I think he must be referring to the fact that she's pro-choice, the baby murdering Nancy Pelosi.
Yeah.
I thought it was a QAnon thing, but I guess it's an abortion reference.
Yeah, I mean, it's all there and it's all intermingled. It's all tangled up. You know, the Q has spread widely among conservative evangelicals to the dismay of some of the leaders, evangelical leaders. And, you know, the idea of God raining down wrath on places that are, you know, support abortion rights, or you know, that you know, Nero Newsom, you know, all these governors,
the Hitler wannabe.
Yeah, all these governors have been, you know, labeled tyrants and dictators for the pandemic restrictions. So that's
Yeah, that's part of his
Yeah, it's
shtick.
remarkable. And it's interesting. I have to say, for him, there's also an element there of just, changing the subject again. All these folks who profess to believe that God has given them the power to decree and declare what happens in the earth,
Yeah.
and they all decreed and declared that Trump was going to stay in office,
Mm-hmm.
and that does not appear to be happening. And so,
Yeah.
he can change the
What now?
subject by talking about Trump getting ready to lay waste to New York or bring down
God's going to
Nancy
do
Pelosi.
that. God's going to lay waste to New York. And he's going to dethrone, Cuomo and Newsom and Pelosi. And I mean, it's just the rantings, the ramblings of a madman, isn't it? But what's interesting, I've been following Greg Locke on Twitter as well. And he was talking about something about how he was interviewed by CNN. And he's been saying that people have been flocking to his church. He's drawing more and more like-minded people to his ministry, in air quotes, his sort of ranting. He's got his 15 minutes of fame right now, and he's making the most of it, isn't he?
Yeah, I mean, I think, one of the things that, has really been amplified in the Trump era is that, there is a seemingly insatiable audience on the right for people to just, stick themselves in front of their telephones and have a channel promoting this kind of angry conspiracy theory stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And, particularly if you combine it with,
the Christian nationalist
the
piece.
power that comes from speaking for God. It's a pretty big mix, pretty heady mix.
Okay, so speaking of conspiracy theories, there's one last thing we have to look at. I'm sure you've seen this, but this is really fascinating. Someone sent me this on Twitter. This is the Nye County, Nevada. I'm sure you've seen this. This is their official website, nygop.org. Have you seen this letter from the county chairman?
Yes, I have.
On their Republican website? This is really fascinating. In fact, there's a disclaimer here where, because he got so many responses to this letter, it went viral. And he's saying, look, it wasn't for the public. It was supposed to be just for our followers. But here's the original letter. This is a guy, Chris Zimmerman. He's the chairman, at least so far. And this is all about conspiracy theories, and here it is right here. Let me be clear. Trump will be president for another 4 years. Biden will not be president. Yes, I know these are shocking words in these crazy days. And he goes on and on and on. Trump doesn't concede at no point. And then there's this issue later on. I mean, this letter goes on and on and on, but this is interesting right here. I don't have the particulars. I can give you the milestones to watch for as the coming days unfold. Expect the emergency broadcast system to be activated. Let's see, expect confusion. We're in a battle for our republic against elites that are attempting the very coup that they are accusing Trump of doing. High-profile arrests are going to be coming in the next 12 days. There's a bumpy ride till the end. Bombshell evidences are going to be released between now and January the 20th. Some sort of internet blockage or outage. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Gmail are going to be taken down. Expect Trump to be inaugurated on January 20th. And then the Insurrection Act is going to be invoked at some point. So this is the letter from the GOP chairman of Nevada. I mean, what the hell is this all about?
It's about more of the same. I mean, it's about how far into the Republican Party all these conspiracy theories and how deeply they've settled there. And there's some folks on the right and the Q crowds who think that Trump has already secretly invoked the Insurrection Act. These arrests are happening behind the scenes. Every once in a while you do see something from some former Q follower who's finally said, I'm done with you people. You've been predicting, for 3 years that 2 weeks from now, the mass arrests are happening. Next month, the mass arrests are happening. The mass arrests are happening. And we've never had mass arrests. So I think some people are finally losing faith there.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that, even after Congress affirmed the Electoral College vote, even after Trump was sort of forced to grudgingly acknowledge that fact, there are still people out there, people with official positions, people with big platforms and audiences who are still refusing to accept that. I mean, that is, I think, it's not just a question of, the fringe conspiracy folks. It's a question of how often Trump and the right-wing media and members of Congress, have been insisting that this was a stolen election. In the face of all the evidence, in the face of all the court rulings, you still have people like Ted Cruz and 100 members of Congress and 100 members of Congress saying, Trump won in a landslide and this was stolen from him. And so, when you have people like that who are still promoting that kind of stuff, it's not surprising that lower level Republican officials would be putting this stuff out there. It's disturbing, and I think there's one of the things that's happening now is all across the country you have communities and bodies like city councils having to wrestle with the fact that some of their law enforcement were at the Capitol, or some of their elected officials were at the Capitol. And what are they going to do about that? And I think people are wrestling with that right now.
I was going to say there's in some respects, there's no bottom to the cult of QAnon, because I'm sure you've seen some of this before they shut Parler down. People were saying that his quote concession speech, that was a deep fake. I'm sure you've seen that it was all staged. It wasn't really him, and it's all being controlled somehow. In fact, our good buddy Greg Locke, he's been ranting about how Mitch McConnell was being secretly controlled by men sitting behind him, giving him hand signals. It's just the Illuminati is all part of this. And there's no bottom for some of these guys though. And where's it going to end? Like you're saying,
I think once you start down some of these conspiracy theory rabbit holes, there are just so many trails you can follow and so many ways to get lost. And, I think a lot of people, I think there's millions of people out there who feel like they have lost family members, almost like the death in the family of people who've been pulled so deeply into these conspiracy theories that you can't have a conversation with them. You can't, it's just like almost they've lost contact with reality completely.
Well, they have. I think,
and it's,
they've been indoctrinated into a cult, really. It's no different than someone in a cult compound that you can't talk to anymore. They're literally physically, emotionally checked out. They're switched off.
Yeah. Well, and it gets to where there's obviously different levels of culpability involved in all this, right? And so you have right now, one of the things that's happening is that kind of all the sort of mainstream religious right leaders, who have political organizations, they've all distanced themselves from the violence, and they said they're against, and this is, this is not how we as Americans do things. This is not how we as Christians do things. On the other hand, someone like Tony Perkins, who's been saying all those things, he also has been heavily promoting the myth that Trump won this election in a landslide, that it was stolen from him. He has signed letters urging Congress to step in. He signed letters urging the state legislators to step in. So he's been on board every effort to overturn the election and the will of the voters up until, the insurrection happened. And then he sort of distanced himself from that, but
a bridge too far.
And, I think it gets to this point that I hope, not with great confidence, that some religious right leaders who are probably genuinely were not expecting what happened to happen will look at how their rhetoric enabled it.
Yeah, it was incendiary.
That they have been telling Christians, all year long leading up to the election, that if Trump is not reelected, it will literally be the end of religious freedom in America. That there will be no second chance 4 years from now to bring the republic back, because the republic will have slidden into leftist totalitarianism, that
Yeah.
churches will be criminalized. I mean, this kind
Oh,
of
I've
rhetoric
heard
was
it.
all over the right. And so if you're, an average freedom-loving American who's hearing this from people you trust, why wouldn't you be willing to do anything under the sun
Hmm.
to try to save America from being lost forever, or being lost for 1,000 years into darkness, as some of the people were saying at the rally on
Yeah.
January 5th. So I think there's a lot of people who did not call for violence and who have denounced the violence, whose rhetoric has certainly fueled the rage and the fear and the resentment that have allowed, that I think built support for the violence. I mean, you still
Yeah.
have, a disturbing number of people on in the Republican Party, according to polls, who, are sympathetic to the people who stormed the Capitol.
Yeah. I've seen that too. Yeah, there's some polls conducted recently after the riots, and a shocking number of people were actually okay with it. You think, whoa, they're not repudiating it. They're actually going, well, but they had a point. Well, like Ivanka tweeting out Ivanka Trump, I should say, tweeting out, these are patriots, and she deleted that tweet. But there was a big backlash, wasn't there? They're calling these guys patriots, and these people, they're being idolized, like Ashley Babbitt. She's a martyr now.
Yes.
And she was shot and killed in the riots, and she had turned into a complete Trumpist as well. Here's this Air Force veteran, seemingly solid citizen, and yet what the hell happened? She gets shot in this riot, and now they're making a martyr out of her. So yeah, that's our world right now. Well, I know we got to get going here. If you're interested, I'm interested too, to get back together next month. If we want to keep doing this, I'm loving these conversations. I'm
Great.
interested to find out what happens after the inauguration, and hopefully things will settle down in a month. I don't know,
I hope
but
so.
thanks
Well,
so much,
and
Peter.
yeah, no, I really appreciate it. I enjoy coming on, and I'll encourage your viewers or listeners to keep an eye on Right Wing Watch, because we're going to be putting up a lot of video clips from those rallies that I've been talking about, of people sort of mingling the Christian nationalism and the threats of violence in really disturbing ways.
Yeah, it's a toxic mix, isn't it? Certainly what we've seen. And I mean, we didn't really talk much about the far right militia groups, but that's another whole thing, isn't it? You've got the Oath Keepers there, you've got the Proud Boys there, the 3%ers, you've got some serious people there coming out with, radios and full tactical gear, and they were organized. They had a plan. It was all set up on social media, days and weeks before. That is very, very serious. There's a big reckoning that's hopefully coming down for those groups as well. What the hell's going on with them?
Yeah, the head of the Oath Keepers, Stuart Rhodes, at the so-called prayer rally on the National Mall in December, said to, if you don't use the military to, overturn the election, stay in power, then we, the militias, are going to have to wage a more bloody civil war. He said that on stage, on the National Mall. And, the good Christian MC responded by saying, God bless you, hey, he's keeping it real, folks. So that's,
wow.
One of the speakers at the rally on the 5th identified himself as a 3%er. The head of the Proud Boys was arrested on his way to Washington, so he was not at the rally. But Greg Locke led a prayer for him and for the Proud Boys at that rally.
I was going to say that. Yeah, that kind of ties the whole thing together, doesn't it? You've got Greg Locke that we've been focusing on today. He's over there leading a prayer for the Proud Boys and Terrio. And so at a rally that then the next day turns into a full insurrection with all this Christian nationalist symbolism all over the place, flags and banners and people wearing hats and Jesus saves, Jesus 2020, Trump is my president, Jesus is my savior. The whole thing was shot through with Christian nationalism as well as the far right militia group. So the conspiracy, it all comes together, doesn't it? So it's a toxic mess. Trumpism. Anyway, well, thanks, Peter, so much. We'll look forward to chatting with you next month. Hopefully things will have settled down a bit, but they're promising, riots in all 50 state capitals on or around inauguration day. So watch this space for sure, isn't it? Something to be definitely mindful of.
Absolutely.